Story time about how I found out my husband was hooking up with men off of Craigslist. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's not me on Instagram. My husband and I have been married for 5 years. This man is the most prudish person I have ever met in my entire life. He never curses, he does not drink. Basically, he's never done anything naughty in his life. When we met, he was the perfect candidate for me. My parents are very religious and very strict. When they saw the way my husband was, basically super uptight, never wanting to do anything fun, they insisted that I marry him. So basically, this is all my parents' fault. To be honest with you guys, I never really was super attracted to him, but I knew that he would be a good provider. He's pretty high up in the company he works for, and he makes north of $300,000 per year. But I do own 2 of my own businesses, so it's not like I need him to survive. But my parents insisted on me marrying somebody who was already well off. And of course, one of my dreams is to become a mother, so I need a man who's going to be able to provide for me and my kids, especially when I'm pregnant. So we ended up getting married. Was there passion and chemistry? Not so much. But we did have a good time, and he would make me laugh. We essentially became really good friends. Up until I found some stuff on his laptop. Part 2 is part 2 of how I found out my husband was hooking up with men off of Craigslist. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. One day while I was working from home, I needed to get on his laptop to check our cameras. I just gotten a new set of security cameras for our house. I needed to make sure that they were all working. I opened his laptop, typed in the password, and it was wrong. It always had the same password for the past 5 years. I didn't bother texting him, instead I tried to guess. And because I know this man so well, I guessed it in the first try. But as soon as I log in, there's about 5 Craigslist windows open, all with similar titles. Male looking for male. Male interested in male company. This literally shook me to my core. You're telling me that I'm married to a gay man and that he's hooking up with men off of Craigslist? That's when I went ahead and checked his email, only to find that he had been sending pictures and other things to these men. Not only that, but he had met with 2 of them. I instantly printed out all the evidence. Like I said in part 1, I'm not particularly attracted to my husband. I never have been. I really only married him because my parents pressured me into it. Here's what I did. Instead of just asking for a divorce, I wanted to humiliate him. I needed to make him pay. After printing everything out, I sent it to his job. And I sent it to his parents and my parents. Part 3 is up. That's when I sent videos of my own husband hooking up with other men to his job, my parents, and his parents. At this point, I had been married to a man that I wasn't attracted to for 5 years, only to find out that he was hooking up with other men off of Craigslist. Remember I said in part 1 how prudish my husband was? He always made himself seem like he was the perfect man, like he had never done anything bad in his life. But let me tell you, some of the things I read in those emails, and the pictures, and the video, disgusting. No wonder he put off having kids for so long, and no wonder he made me get on the pill, because he never had the intention of having kids. When everyone received their packages, my husband called me super upset. He said that he had only done it for about a week, and that it was just him experimenting. Then he told me that his job put him on suspension. My parents, of course, stopped speaking to him. My mother-in-law calls me on the phone and tells me that she had always known that he was gay, and apparently they insisted on him not marrying me. But he was set on having the perfect wife, the perfect life. We're obviously getting a divorce now, and I'm getting all his money, or at least I'm gonna try. He's already claiming that I'm obsessed with him, so he wants to get a restraining order. I need to make him suffer even more. How should I do this? Part 4 will be up soon. Story time about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. What should I do? Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 11 months. Here's a little backstory. We both work at the same company and live very far from our parents. I try to go home once a month since my parents are only 2 hours away from me. His parents live in a different country. For that reason, I haven't met his parents. But he's met my parents and he's been completely respectful and really nice to them. So I never suspected that he could be abusive to his parents. So here's what happened. We flew over to his parents and they are very rich. His mom is an interior designer and their house is phenomenal. His dad owns a couple of businesses and together they are very wealthy. His parents went to pick us up at the airport and everything was fine until we got to their house. They decided to give me a tour of their ginormous mansion. That's when I noticed that my boyfriend was being kind of rude to them. Every time they would ask me a question, he would answer and be like, duh, she likes pizza. He even asked his mom to stop asking stupid questions. I stopped him in his tracks and in front of his parents I said, why are you being rude to your parents? The look on his parents' face was of shock. And that's when I realized that they had never disciplined him. But then it got worse. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's on Instagram. The look on his parents' face when I called him out for being rude to them was complete shock. After they gave me the tour of the house, we decided to sit down for dinner. They are so rich that they have their own chef. That's when the chef comes out and starts serving all the food. And as soon as my boyfriend sees what they served, he grabs his glass of water and bangs it against the table. He looks at both of his parents and says, what the fuck is wrong with you both? The color from their faces drain. That's when they said, I'm sorry, we didn't know he was gonna make this. The chef decided to make a really fancy meatloaf. Apparently he hates meatloaf. Then he said, well, tell him to make something else. His mother gets up and runs to the kitchen and asks the chef to make him a burger, because that's his favorite food. Which, by the way, I never even knew that. He always told me his favorite food was Indian. His mom comes back from the kitchen, then he looks at me and says, you don't have to eat that shit if you don't want to. I told him that he was being a brat and that I'd be happy to eat the meatloaf. His parents look at me and smile. My boyfriend just gets up from the table and runs away. Can you believe I had to chase after him? Part 3 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend is abusive to his parents. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. It's on Instagram. That's when my stupid boyfriend runs away from the dinner table. So of course I have to chase him. And of course I'm angry at this point. I ask him why he's being so rude to his parents. Then he literally denies that he just did anything. His words were, "You're reading too much into it. My parents are stupid anyway." I looked at him and I said, "Do you not see the mansion we're standing in? How did two stupid people manage to build this mansion, 4 businesses, and put you through school?" He rolls his eyes at me and says, "Jesus Christ, you sound like my parents." I told him that he was a privileged rat. You see, I come from a family where we don't have chefs, and we don't have millions of dollars or a mansion. So I appreciate everything my parents did for me. I went back to the dining room and I told his parents it was nice to meet them, but that I could no longer be with their son. That's when his mom started begging me not to leave. It was hard, but I called an Uber and I went home. My boyfriend's been begging me to get back with him. He's trying really hard too. His parents are even offering to pay my student loans. I'm honestly confused now. What should I do? Story time about how my ex-husband married my mother. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on Instagram. My husband and I divorced about a year ago. Little backstory. When my husband and I were together, we didn't really have infidelity problems. We mostly had financial problems, and we just didn't agree on having kids. I definitely did not want kids and he wanted kids. Anyway, we ended up getting divorced after 2 years of being married. Now, when he and I were married, him and my mom always got along super well. More than your average son-in-law, mother-in-law. Of course, this always made me happy. My husband just made her laugh a lot, and they would even sometimes go and have dinners together or just get drinks together. Exactly a year after he and I got divorced, towards the end of my marriage with my husband, he confessed to me that he is very attracted to older women. He even joked about how he might get with my mom after he divorced me. I thought it was funny, we both laughed. Well, fast forward exactly a year later. My mom invites me and my siblings over to her house for dinner. Suddenly, my ex-husband comes out of the kitchen and they both announce that they are getting married. And then they start tonguing each other. The worst part is that a few days before, I told my mom that I was missing my ex-husband. Part 2 is up. That's when my ex-husband grabbed me and just started making out with me. I couldn't resist it. When we finally finished making out, he tells me that he's still gonna marry my mother. I asked him why, and he said that he was marrying her because she really needed him. He kept saying things like, she's a lonely woman, she's getting older, she needed someone to take care of her. Mind you, I have 4 siblings and me who literally are always there for my mother. I have never left this woman alone a day in her life. That's when I started remembering something. A few years ago, he had a friend who married an older woman, and that basically he became her sugar baby. Then I realized that around this time, he had gotten fired from his job. Then I accused him of wanting to become a sugar baby. He got so angry he left my apartment. Then I get a call from my mother. Guess what my mom says? She said that she's willing to support him because he gives her everything she needs. She even told my brothers and sisters that we could only come to her house if we are invited. My ex-husband blocked me, trying to convince my mom to block all of us. Because of this, they got into a huge fight. My ex-husband came back to me again, but I said no. What the heck should we do? Story time about how my mother is marrying my ex-husband. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on Instagram. I had just told my mom that I was missing my ex-husband and that I might text him. No wonder she didn't reply, because 2 weeks later they're announcing that they're getting married. As he's making out with my mom in front of her kids, in front of me, I get up from the table and I leave. At this point, I'm still not over my ex-husband. Yes, we both agreed to get a divorce, but the more time I spent away from him, the more I realized that maybe I did want kids, and that he was the perfect person to do it with. Well, at this point, I have nothing else. My ex is marrying my mom. Basically, everyone followed me into the kitchen. That's when I just let it rip. I told my mom that she was the worst mom in the world, and that I had told her 2 weeks before that I was missing my ex-husband. That's when my ex-husband looks at my mom and says, "Is that true?" My mom looks at him and says, "Yes, it's true." Then he turns to me and says that he's sorry, but he's no longer in love with me, and that the one he wants to be with is my mother. My siblings and I were all really upset, so we decided to leave. Once I get home, I get a text from my ex-husband asking to meet up with me. Comes over to my apartment, and as soon as he comes in, he tries to kiss me. I couldn't resist and I kissed him back. Part 3 is up.